Hi guys, Bill again. This is actually the second time that I've recorded this. The original's actually banned in the UK. And shit you know, a song that you can't buy anymore, and probably the best known, most watched clip from Trainspotting, are off limits here in Blighty. Who knew? I want to share a couple of thoughts on the election result, on its implications, and I want to address a couple of points that were raised by two of my favourite YouTubers, Thunderfoot and Noel Plum. Now, if you don't know who they are, check out their channels. They're really good. Jim, Noel Plum 99, Jim's a big part of why I kept making videos, for all sorts of different reasons. Now, they're both skeptics, they're both active in the movement, although that's a bit like saying a cat's a leading figure in a herd. But they're both extremely perceptive. They're also both English, and they tend to slip into the unconscious bias that's common to the in-group that thinks of itself as belonging to that nation. Now, Dr. Phil Mason, Thunderfoot, is a well-travelled man. He's a scientist and he works abroad most of the time. Now, he's recently had some bad family news and had to come home, so Phil, if you ever do watch this, you've got my heartfelt sympathy. He was watching the debacle that passes for politics on our misty islands, and it was all a bit of a culture shock for him, and I can relate to that. I've only recently come back home myself and seen the Mother of Parliaments filled with fucking chimpanzees. That kind of got to me as well. I reckon they'd be flinging shite at each other if they weren't so incompetent and they couldn't find their own arse using both hands. Thunderfoot posted up a brief commentary. I've linked it below. Kinda got me thinking though. Last year, Noel Plum made a couple of vids round about the referendum, and the points he made were interesting. Now, they were different to Thunderfoot's, but they seemed to show the same attitude towards the Scots. They were definitely the out group to the boys.
Oh, yeah, the Conservatives, no. Then you get to the Scottish National Party, and if I had time to edit this, which I don't because I go to hospital tomorrow, but if I did, I would cut in for the Scottish National Party, and they want independence of Scotland, and so they want this referendum, we want to be an independent country. And it's something crazy, like the population of Scotland is comparable to the population of London. Both about, 6-8 million people, something like that. And you got to ask yourself, is that really worth actually all the hassle of splitting this stuff into extra countries? But I still think that, like I said, if I had time, I would cut in this wonderful scene from Trainspotting where there's Renton going on about Scotland, how it's shite being Scottish, we're the lowest of the low, the scum of the fucking earth, some people hate the British, not me, they're just wankers. We on the other hand are colonised by wankers. Can't even find a decent race to be colonised by. Anyway, so it goes on. I think there's an argument for doing this the other way around about should the rest of the UK have a referendum of whether we should expel Scotland? Because it's the presumption that, everyone else wants them to stay. Whereas the Romans built a wall to keep them out, No, I'm just kidding. It just, the Scottish nationalists, it just seems, is that really the biggest issue that you think faces your country?
Now, the first thought that comes to mind is, why is this funny? The Irish fought 800 years for their independence. Now, they've got few natural resources and they've got a somewhat smaller population than Scotland, but they're making their way just fine in the world today, They're a successful independent nation. Now, Scotland, a region of the United Kingdom often incorrectly referred to as a country, has far greater natural resources and could, theoretically anyway, achieve a similar level to success as countries like Iceland, Ireland, Belgium, Holland, Denmark. All of them have much less natural wealth to fall back on. But I think that's probably setting the bar a bit low. Norway is much closer to Scotland in terms of resources, in terms of genetics, maybe even in terms of national character. Norway's wealthier than the entire United States. Money's not the issue, and population's not the issue either. That pretty much leaves policy. The Scots aren't in step with the rest of the UK. The last time that we voted for a Conservative majority was back in 1955. Now, since then, our needs and our wants have been paid lip service to at best, and we're often seen as easy targets for things like cuts, new, contentious or unpopular legislation, and we're a great whipping boy when numpties want to appeal to the Little Englanders. That myth about English taxpayers paying for layabout jocks to get jumped up in luxury mansions masquerading as council houses has been debunked more often than the wage gap. But it's still getting trotted out on a regular basis by lying scumbags trying to appease our English siblings. The question about whether it's worth going our separate ways is a serious one. Now, we had our say, and 55% of Scots chose to become British. We had a choice that no British person has ever been given, and we decided to embrace the Union. Now think on that for a moment. And while you're mulling it over, watch this. That was supposed to be a Trainspotting clip. Yeah, Google's your friend. It's on YouTube. Take a look for it. Scotland is shite. It's funny stuff. Now, it's painful to watch, but it's fucking funny. The problem is, though, Danny Boyle missed the joke. Danny was Trainspotting's director. He's an Englishman. He made a film that was financed by Channel 4 for a largely English audience. Very early on, his team chose to change the film's settings from Edinburgh over to Glasgow. Now, Edinburgh is, well, it's the Athens of the North. It's renowned for culture, architecture, genteel people, you know, all good stuff. Glasgow, maybe not so much. It's a bit like taking a story about drug addicts from a Washington prospect and giving it the art house treatment to make it all about New Yorkers. Now, the scene in that script is supposed to show a scab of Edinburgh junkies trying to make a spiritual connection with their ancestral Highland roots. But the joke is, they don't have any. The Highlands were once home to the Gaels, people who were cleared off the land, and in Scotland they generally ended up in Glasgow. Renton is raving. Renton is a character that's played by Ewan McGregor in the film. Renton is raving at a false history. He's voicing Irvine Welsh's distaste for the tendency that Lowland Scots have. They try and buy into the British equivalent of a Hollywood history, and it's got fuck all to do with him. Irvine Welsh is from Edinburgh. He hasn't got a drop of Highland blood in him, and it really annoys him that all his other fellow Edinburgh people want to pretend that they have. There's a real east-west divide here, and it's every bit as pronounced as the English or American north-south divide. It's all about context. Now, the next slide is from Dick Gaughan. That's the 20-year-old song that you can't buy anymore, that YouTube takes such offence to me playing. It sums it up pretty succinctly. Now, interestingly enough, maybe deliberately, The Campbells were Georgian loyalists. They were Highlanders who fought against the Jacobites to preserve the United Kingdom. During that rebellion, Edinburgh didn't put any defence up against the rebel invaders at all. Either way, Dick Gaughan's protagonist is called Duncan Campbell, and he gets taken for Irish the moment he sets foot into the capital. Now, I've had pretty much the same thing myself. Anyway, like I say, hit pause. A feeling that Noel echoed is the notion that the rest of the UK should take a vote on whether to eject the Scots. Now, it's kind of putting the cart before the horse. If the English, or the Welsh, or the Northern Irish, if they want to leave the Union, then I'm all for them having a referendum on the matter. You know, it's their choice, they can go if they want. But the question has to be the same one that was put to the Scots. Do you want to become British? Not, do you want to chuck out another part of the United Kingdom? Now, British is not the same as English. In spite of the very English habit of claiming ownership of both titles, I know that there's no malice intended, but it is bloody irritating all the same. More importantly than that though, it's a mental roadblock. It prevents English people, especially English politicians, from understanding a region that they consider to be a foreign country. You see, if England and Britain are interchangeable, then Scotland cannot be British because it's not English. Misconceptions mount. Not sharing, not even wanting to share, very common English held views doesn't make the Scots anti-English. It just means that the Scots don't hold the same views. So you've got to ask yourself, what happened in the election? Why did the Scots, when they were convinced by Darling and the No lobby to overwhelmingly support the Union just last year, suddenly vote en masse for a party that's dedicated to breaking the Union up? There's a lot of different reasons why. I suspect that it had a lot to do with the behaviour of our southern politicians during the referendum. There was very little acknowledgement of the Scots' past contribution to the Union, but there was a huge amount of doubt cast on our ability to do without the Union. Now, the decision to become British is one that we took with our eyes wide open. The myth about being supported economically by our benevolent southern overlords was blown wide open. It was blown open years ago. We support the Union. The Union does not support us. It's an expensive business. Everyone had their own reasons for voting the way they did. But most of us accepted that if you want to be in the Union, then it's worth paying over the odds for. Now, I don't want to revisit the yes-no debate, but I really want you to consider just how Westminster looked from up here. I've actually taken fire under Cameron's orders. I've risked my life for that useless cunt. But he couldn't be arsed taking a train up north to make the case for staying in the UK. The spineless fucking twat left it to Labour to fight it out with the Nationalists. Not that Miliband was any better. Didn't see that prick up here either. Alistair Darling was the only UK politician with the balls to step up to the mark and stand up for the Union. Now, believe me, people, when the most important vote in British history is left to Blair's spin doctor, that leaves a fucking bitter taste in your mouth. The Westminster politicians from the national parties either cannot or will not risk their petty little egos, even when the fate of the entire nation is at stake. That campaign revealed them for the cowardly, turd-throwing monkeys that they really are. And if we're going to be paying over the odds to stay in this union, we need representation. We need to have our say. Now, even piercingly intelligent, egalitarian and fair-minded people like Jim and Phil see us as others. We're the only people in British history to choose that nationality with no other pressure other than the yes or no vote. But to English people, the people who make up the vast majority of Britain's MPs, we're different. We're the out group. And if we're the out group, we need somebody who considers themselves part of that out group to fight our corner for us. Now, it doesn't mean that as a nation or as a region we want another referendum. It certainly doesn't mean that we dislike the English, much less hate our southern brothers and sisters. But we can't, and we won't, trust the pathetic gobshites that are infesting Westminster. They don't look after our interests. So Thunderfoot, well, China, you should be careful what you wish for. From the blandest political landscape in the free world, we've just voted ourselves possibly the most interesting parliament I've seen in my lifetime. I don't know about you, but I'm looking forward to fireworks. Anyway, laters guys.